Remember last year's amazing trip? That cute first birthday party? All those photos, all those memories can be freed from your phone with a Shutterfly photo book. Rediscover and share your favorite moments with those you love. You'll be amazed how easy it is to make a photo book with Shutterfly and enjoy it for years to come. Get 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
This episode of The Price of Football is supported by International Sports Convention 2025, which is taking place on March the 19th and 20th at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. More than 1,000 delegates and 100 speakers will be attending the event, and they will be covering a huge range of topics, from sponsorship and fan engagement to governance and integrity. Founded in 2009, International Sports Convention is the meeting place for the business of sport and has been for the last 16 years.
And there's a special treat for those lucky enough to attend the 2025 edition. The two of us will also be appearing. We'll be having a chat about football finance and governance in front of a live audience. You can book your place now at a special early offer price by going to internationalsportsconvention.com. But don't delay, that special early offer price is only available until the 20th of February.
Book your place now for International Sports Convention 2025 at Spurs Stadium on the 19th and 20th of March by going to internationalsportsconvention.com, and hopefully we'll see you there. Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game, with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, we'll come on to where you are in a second, so our listeners like to know whereabouts in the country you are, so they can put a little pin on their map. Just helps them with context. But first of all, that was Ali leaving quietly. That's thoughts. She's not very good at tiptoeing, that girl. I love her very much, but tiptoeing is not one of her strong points. Context, Kieran. Yeah, well, we should point out, Kieran, that it's sometimes very frustrating that we're not a football pod, because both our teams got done by pretty ropey decisions over the weekend. But we can at least console ourselves, Kieran, that Michael Oliver wasn't refereeing our game. The fact that we can't, the guy was very firm about this. We got enough to talk about. It's Questions Day, Football Finance Day. The whole of the world has been talking about one of the worst, most arrogant refereeing decisions ever made, and I'm including Mark Clattenburg in that. Who would have thought Mark Clattenburg will be at home wiping his brow going, oh, do you know what, I think this might get Kevin Day off my back. That decision is just... But we can't talk about it, Kieran. I can see you're itching to talk about it, but no, you can't.
I've seen the Brighton penalty, and it's either a free kick to Brighton or it's a penalty. And if it had gone the other way, I'd have been delighted and I've been screaming for it. But yeah, these things happen. I can't use the referee to excuse the fact that we didn't manage a shot on target for 90 minutes or 99 minutes or whatever it was. Yes,
you can. You are the worst sort of football fan. I can't stand football fans. As Palace fans yesterday said, well, if his toe was in the deed, and that's technically... No, you've got to be partisan about these things, Kieran. You can't be going, no, I think the referee's doing an okay job in difficult circumstances. Yeah. We need to start another pod that's just football that producer guy doesn't know about, even if it's only a very short one. Questions Day, Kieran. And talking of disquiet in the Paulson's Arms, our first question comes from John Vince, who's a Palace fan and a denizen. Of course, I think that's probably the best way of describing people who go into Paulson's Arms, denizen. John Vince says, which club makes most money from a bag drop facility? This seems to be something that's come in more and more over recent years, especially after COVID lockdowns lifted and fans were let back in the grounds. I have to say, Kieran, when I first read this, I thought bag drop facility was something that Uncle Terry would probably arrange at some stage. I'm still not entirely sure what a bag... Are we talking like left luggage here, Kieran? Like...
It is. Right. If you take a look at the terms and conditions on most tickets for clubs, they will say there is a maximum size of bag that you as an individual can bring onto the premises. I can understand this from the point of view of clubs, in the sense that there's a lot of people wanting to get into the stadium in a very short period of time, and therefore, if they have to do a full my rucksack, if I'm coming down, is rammed full of God knows what, old spreadsheets, laptops, God knows how many wires, and so on, and it does slow down the process. So what clubs have said is, if it's bigger than an A4 envelope, you can't bring it in, and instead you have to pay for the privilege of having it stored elsewhere. Now, if we take a look at the amounts being charged, Manchester United charge £5, I think City charge 10, Liverpool 5 to 10, Fulham 5, I think at Brighton, I think they charge a £5. I'm not I'll have to check up on that one. And it does two things. First of all, it discourages people from bringing bags, and I can understand that from the perspective of the club. But also, I do think at times you've got to be a little bit more conciliatory. So if I give you an example, in a couple of weeks' time, Brighton are playing Chelsea. They've shifted the match for TV purposes to 8 p.m. on Valentine's evening, on a Friday night. I'm teaching in Liverpool until 3:30. I'm then getting on the train, legging it from Liverpool. I've done all of my checks. I should get there either just as the match is starting or a few minutes after. Yeah, for people that are effectively commuting from work to the football ground, it does cause an additional problem, because what are you supposed to do? You can't. But it's a byproduct of having kickoff times being dictated to by the broadcasters, and the clubs will say they pay the most money. They pay. But in terms of who will make the most money, I suspect it's Manchester United, because they've got the biggest capacity stadium. I mean, to be fair to Manchester United and all of these clubs, from what I can see, all of the profits from the bag drop goes to the club foundation. I just hope when they're calculating profits, they are calculated in a fair and measured way, because having seen the creative accounting applied at other aspects of football clubs, I'd be very disappointed. I'd be very disappointed if all of a sudden, they made £10 profit over the course of the season in terms of running these. So it's an inconvenience for fans, but it's also an inconvenience for clubs. Clubs have a responsibility in terms of what they're allowed to let into the stadium, and if we as fans are taking up time, this is one way of addressing it.
I hope Sir Jim Ratcliffe is not listening to this pod, Kieran, because if he discovers that the profits from anything are going towards the foundation, he'll put an end to that. So I get what you're saying about evening games, Kieran, but if there's a bag drop facility at Selhurst Park, I'm not aware of it, because who's taking luggage to a 3 o'clock kickoff at Palace? I don't quite get why it's necessary.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think for Palace, let's face it, most Palace fans walk to the stadium, or will get, or will go, a couple of stops on the train, because you've got a fan base which is in a fairly close radius. If you're an away fan, let's say that you've caught the train down. Okay, well you brought your bag with you because you might have your thermos, you might have some reading material, you might have bits and pieces. Certainly, when I go to away matches on the train, I've got my laptop. I'm updating spreadsheets for the whole of the journey and so on. So I've got that as a challenge this Saturday at Forest. And for clubs who are, let's be honest, a bigger brand than either of ours, you've got fans who are travelling from different places in the country and also different countries. They might only be in Manchester or Liverpool or London for one day, and they'll be wanting to get in and out. I remember when I went to Berlin for 3 days to watch the Euro finals. I did that with a bag which was it was Ryanair friendly, shall we say?
Well,
and
not that small.
Yeah, the Baroness saying, "How on earth can you do that? You've not got enough pairs of underpants." I said, "Well, I'm an ex-student, so one pair of underpants lasts 4 days because you've got front to back, back to front, inside out, front to back, and inside out, back to front. Yeah. And she didn't seem to understand how student life was back in the 1980s.
Yeah, but apparently David Beckham, I hear, never wears a pair of pants twice. He wears a pair of pants and then they get thrown away.
Wow.
So, I don't know. I won't mention which turnstile I'm talking about, but there is one particular steward at Palace, and rightly so, I think. Well, not in terms of security, probably not, but there's no reason to get to the Arthurwaite early. So no one does. So it's a real kick bollock scramble about 5 to 3. And basically, he will say, "Can I have a look in your bag?" And as long as the person says yes, of course, he's happy with that, because that implies that they're perfectly safe and secure, and there can't be anything in the bag. And sometimes you think, well, just occasionally have a look in. Mate, you never know. Lck Norton has our next question. And I like the sound of Lachlan, because Lachlan says, like 95% of our listeners, I've been thinking about the limits that profit and sustainability rules are putting on Newcastle and wondering about a novel solution. Now, the reason I like that is that in about 3 or 4 questions' time, we've got somebody asking a similar question about profit and sustainability and wondering whether they'd go to prison for suggesting it. Right, so Lachlan's clearly on the nicer side. He has a novel solution. So theoretically, says Lachlan Norton, could the Saudis spend £100 million handing out Newcastle club shop gift cards to fans around the city and overseas, which means the fans would spend it on the club in the gift shop, therefore boosting the club's income without the money coming directly from the owners? Forgive me if this is incredibly stupid or has been asked before. I don't think it's stupid. I think it's nice. I think it's nice, Kieran. It hasn't been asked before, as far as I know, the idea of just handing out club cards, gift cards that you've got to spend in the club shop.
Yeah, certainly under the present version of PSR, that would appear to probably be acceptable. So if the Public Investment Fund unilaterally and independently, let's say it decided to have a raffle, and the winning prizes included £100 or £500 worth of vouchers for Newcastle United, and owing to some form of technical glitch, everybody who entered the raffle ended up winning £100 or £500. So then they could pop down and get themselves a John Joe Shelby duvet cover or whatever merchandise they fancied. And this would deem to be part of commercial income. I suspect the Premier League and other clubs might raise an eyebrow or two, and it would possibly, if not probably, result in a potential change of rules. But I think under the present rules, it's just about acceptable. I think it would be interesting to see what would happen to these gift cards, because I would imagine what you will find is a big secondary market would be created, in the sense of, right, I've got £500 worth of vouchers for Newcastle United. I'll be honest, I've already bought the kit, the away kit, the third kit. I've got everything. What will you give me for this? And I'm certainly aware of this has been the case when vouchers have been used to help other people in other sets of circumstances. And you end up saying, well, the going rate is perhaps 40 pence in the pound. So somebody will give you £200 for your £500 worth of voucher. Then they'll go and spend £500. But Newcastle United don't care. As far as they're concerned, somebody spent £500 in the megastore. So could it possibly be done? Yes. Is it likely to result in a very, very quickly convened emergency meeting of Premier League chief executives and a 19-1 vote takes place? I suspect that might be the case as well.
Yeah. I like the idea of a raffle where everybody wins, which is the exact opposite of one of Uncle Terry's raffles, where no one was winning. Mysteriously, it's a 64-week rollover. Our next question comes from Lincoln Pigman. It's an interesting one, Kieran. It's something that comes up from time to time, but we haven't discussed for a little while. Lincoln says last year it emerged that the EU would extend its anti-money laundering regime to clubs, agents and associations. will this move go far in cleaning up the sport, or is it too little, too late? And presumably, given that we have a near year-long waiting list, Kieran, I presume that we've had a bit of time to see whether or not the AML regime has been making a difference.
Well, the EU did bring into its remit, as far as anti-money laundering was concerned, the responsibility of the football industry to become an obliged entity. And an obliged entity is, let's say that I see somebody trying to nick next door's bicycle. I could be a good citizen and stop them. I could be a good citizen and phone up the police. Or I could say, well, can't be asked. See, I'm under no obligation to report a crime.
Right.
Whereas if you become an obliged entity, what you have to do is you have to take on the responsibilities of this. And you might be saying, well, why are we moving into a set of circumstances in which the football industry has become part of anti-money laundering? I'm not doing this to big myself up, but I gave a talk, I think it was 2 years ago, to Interpol, Europol, and the National Crime Agency about fraud in football. And for me, it was just one of my normal chit-chats. Although I turned up completely inappropriately dressed. Not as inappropriately dressed as I probably was on Friday night at the ABBA Voyage event, but that's a separate story.
Would you like to clarify for new listeners what you were wearing, how inappropriately attired you were for this meeting with high-level Interpol officers?
I turned up in an Interpol T-shirt because Interpol are one of my favourite bands. So I thought I would be, a little bit left field, a little bit wacky, and they thought, "Who's this Burke?" Because of course they're all suited and booted.
I think that's one thing we all know about Interpol, Kieran. Their tendency to wackiness every now and again on a Friday afternoon. I thought you looked very handsome at the ABBA concert in a kind of Dave Swindlehurst 1975 sort of way.
Yes. The Baroness did not share your view. So why has football come into? And the reason why I mentioned Interpol and Europol was that when I was having a conversation with some of the officers, some of the dignitaries at the event, they said if you are taking a look at growth rates in terms of what we might somewhat smugly say white-collar crime, i.e. fraud, a crime when nobody's getting beaten up in effect, or nobody's actually saw necessarily loss of a physical product, but you're being rinsed potentially. The three areas which they mentioned: A, crypto, which is no great surprise; B, fine art; and C, football. I'm going, blimey, I just thought I was brought in as part, effectively as a light entertainment talk to tie up the event. So why are we in this situation where there are concerns about money laundering? Well, it's for the following issues. First of all, football is an industry with very opaque pricing. I know how much it costs to buy an iPhone. I know how much it costs to buy a washing machine. A left back from Uzbekistan, there's no market price for them. So could you inflate the prices to help? We've also seen quite a few unusual sponsor arrangements in terms of the values being used. Blimey, that's an awful lot of money for that. And then the sponsors disappear and it all gets a bit strange. So you've got the problem of there's no real fair market value, despite the attempts of both UEFA and the Premier League and the EFL to do this for sponsor arrangements. There's no fair market value for transfers. And I think anybody saw anybody was watching the Manchester City versus Chelsea match and that poor lad who within 5 minutes of, if that's £25 million, I need to get my boots back on. So it was a bit strange. Secondly, it's cross-border. And the whole point about money laundering is money laundering tends to be a global, certainly an international crime. Well, that suits football very well, because you just take a look at the Premier League and the number of global transactions that are taking place. Thirdly, there's quite a bit of confusion about sources and destinations of funds. Where has that money come from? And you go, well, yeah, we can. We can perhaps question where that money's come from, but you start to follow the money, and then you reach a brick wall. It's a Jersey-based company, it's a Cayman Islands-based company, and certainly when I try to follow transactions through, that's where things tend to come to a stop. Fourthly, there are many. And this is actually from sort of some of the reading I was doing, when I was researching this. It simply said oligarchs and other high-risk individuals are often involved. So if you've got mysterious sponsorship from an oligarch or an oligarch-owned company, where did they get that money from? Is that the result of some form of sanctions which were being applied or being tried to be applied, and this is a workaround? And fifthly, there's just a general lack of controls. Even though I think FIFA do quite a good job in terms of ensuring that transfer fees are paid, they don't actually investigate where the money's come from to pay those transfer fees. So that's what we have as far as Lincoln's concerned. Now, it has to be said, doesn't apply to the Premier League because this country is no longer in the EU, but it does have an impact on the Premier League because the Premier League is involved in so many cross-border transactions with EU companies. There is legislation that deals with this sort of domestically on a broader issue, and I think there will be some compliance issues for Premier League clubs. I think, to be fair to the EU here, it's only going to apply for large clubs. Otherwise, I think there would be overreach. And that works both ways. I'm aware of one club, which I cannot mention, which was being used for money laundering purposes because it seemed to generate an awful lot of money through matchday activities and a few sponsorship deals. It eventually reached a point where it was making so much money from money laundering that they had to go and find another club as effectively as a backup, because I've always said this when you're dealing with the England revenue: if you treat them with respect and you don't take the mickey, they'll treat you with respect and accordingly. Well, if all of a sudden you've got a club in wherever it happens to be, its revenue trebles in a year, and you're going, well, they're not winning matches. Why on earth is that happening? It might cause somebody to investigate further. So this money laundering organisation had to find a second football club to put its illicit cash it was generating through another set of turnstiles, which is quite a crazy event. And there's things taking place which I'm not prepared to mention on air, involving yet a third club. So it's absolutely crazy stuff. Clubs now have to actively report something when they think something's suspicious. They've got to have better internal controls. It's not going to apply to the small clubs. And also, under the rules, you've got to have what we refer to as customer due diligence. And we've reported on the Price of Football on quite a few football clubs that have signed up sponsorship arrangements, normally with, and this is not being xenophobic in any way, normally in line with gambling organisations based in Asia.
Are you at liberty to even say if these clubs are English, these money laundering clubs?
Yeah.
They are?
They are.
Okay.
Yeah.
You rather took the wind out of my sails with what I thought was a clever backup question, Kieran, when you mentioned oligarchs, because I was going to ask whether, in the horse racing world, races at Ascot level, Cheltenham level are squeaky clean because there's so much scrutiny. You won't see a jockey dropping his hands 2 lengths to go. They will be trying to win every match. Arguably less so at maybe Southall or Uttoxeter on a wet February afternoon when there's far less scrutiny. So would I be correct in saying that for the most part, if somebody was going to use a football club to launder money, they would look for a League One, League Two club where the scrutiny is presumably lower than they would look for a Premier League club simply for those purposes?
I think for the types of money laundering that I'm thinking of, yes. In terms of sponsorship, sometimes you do it and it's so brazen that people say, well, it can't be doing that because it just looks too obvious.
Right.
So yeah, it's intriguing.
Okay.
But yes, I agree with you. Smaller clubs, and it's a bit like match fixing. You're not going to get match fixing in the Premier League. You're not going to get match fixing, in all probability in EFL level. But because the gambling industry is now willing to open a book on practically any league in practically any country, when we've seen this in cricket, there's also been allegations relating to it in both tennis and snooker. It's open to abuse, and to be fair to the gambling industry, their controls are pretty impressive. We saw, in fact, a Premier League footballer who seemed to be getting unusual yellow cards, on which there was a book for him to get to get a yellow card. These things happen.
Well, Wimbledon players quite openly admitted, didn't they? The so-called crazy gang, that they would bet on there being a throw-in within the first 5 seconds, hope that they got to take the kick-off and kick the ball straight out.
Yes.
They were happy to admit that.
And also, you wouldn't spot it being Wimbledon because
that's what they do. Absolutely.
That's what they do anyway,
yeah. Callum Scott has a very interesting question, I think, Kieran. And Callum Scott's question is this: does the income a club makes from social media go fully toward the club's profits, or is it split between the club and the players? So, for example, says Callum, does some of this revenue go to players for image rights? Also, how significant an effect does social media income have? For example, YouTube ad revenue, X ad revenue, and so on. I'm curious if any lower league club uses X's premium feature to add potentially valuable extra income.
When it comes to a player being used for social media purposes, their contract will dictate the maximum number of times that they can be used. Otherwise, if you think about when Manchester United had Wayne Rooney and Cristiano Ronaldo or David Beckham, those would be the players that the sponsors would want, or the social media department would want all the time. So in order to protect the players, there would be a ceiling on that. And again, it could be embedded into the player's contract, is that if you're going to do more than 2 a season, then the player is entitled to either a percentage or a flat fee in order to give up their time to make fairly inane, well practiced comments on social media. As far as the revenues are concerned, looking at what I have found, if you get 1 million views on YouTube, you potentially could make somewhere in the region of £3,000 to £5,000. So you've got to do an awful lot of work, or you've got to do an awful lot of clips for that to become viable. But what we are seeing is sort of dedicated activities. So we've got Manchester United TV, for example, and which has been going for 20 years. It tends to make a break, tends to break even, but it's got more than 100 employees.
Yeah.
So it had more than 100 employees, I suspect, and the highest paid director of Manchester United TV is on $500,000 a year.
Wow.
Which is quite spectacular. We've also got the rise in terms of social media, and I appreciate this is slightly off-piste, of the rise of dedicated channels. So, Gary Neville, Roy Keane, and the Overlap, they regularly generate certainly many hundreds of thousands. Sometimes they'll generate more than a million downloads. You've got the likes of the Anfield Wrap for Liverpool, the United Stand, Stretford Paddock for Manchester United. And you look at these organisations, they're employing people. The United Stand and the Anfield Wrap both employ, I think, between 12 to 15 staff, which is great in a way. And they make money. I follow the accounts of all of these organisations, and they are very profitable because they're appealing to a global audience. And the Anfield Wrap I hold in very high regard, and as I do the Stretford Paddock. They're genuine United fans and Liverpool fans who are local and explaining it as it is.
Yeah, Palace podcasts, especially the 5-year plan, which I'm associated with, it's a slightly more laissez-faire attitude to making money. It's I just really enjoy doing it. If people want to listen, they want to listen. I can't imagine the idea of the 5-year plan employing anybody. Tom Skinner has our next question, Kieran. This is one I've been looking forward to. Tom Skinner says, have I found the clever FFP loophole, or would I end up in jail? Which is just the fact that he's worried about the fact he might end up in jail if we read his question out. If two clubs each had a homegrown player who may or may not be very good, says Tom, and the clubs agree to a swap deal for £50 million, presumably that £50 million is 100% profit and counts towards FFP. The transfer fee could be amortised over 5 years, meaning that both clubs could register a £40 million profit on the deal. Is there a reason that clubs aren't already doing this?
I suspect this question is from our big inbox, because this is exactly what we saw in June 2024. We saw Anderson going from Newcastle to Forest. Forest's third choice goalkeeper was mysteriously signed by Newcastle to become their third choice goalkeeper. We had the deals between Chelsea and Villa, Everton and Villa, and so on. Now, they weren't always homegrown players, but Leicester, Kieran Dewsbury Hall, homegrown player. He went from Leicester to Chelsea. I think somebody went from the opposite direction and so on. So it is an increasing issue. I think it's a classic example, and the Premier League used the phrase unintended consequences. Well, this is an unintended consequence of the current format of PSR rules, in that football clubs are using young players in the main as inventory. I had a meeting with somebody from a Premier League club before Christmas, and clearly we can't name the club, but they made it perfectly clear that as far as their academy is concerned, it's a means of nurturing money. It's a bit like having a salmon farm or something like that, where you're going to let them grow, you're going to let them improve, and they're not good enough necessarily to be sold to to go to top table, but they'll go to the supermarket and they'll be used for sales purposes. And part of me says it's business. Look, they're still going to get a career in football, or certainly the ones who are good enough to be sold are going to get a career in football. And I would imagine any of us listening to this show would say a career in football, I'd take it, even if it's not an ability to play for my homegrown club. And at the other side, sort of the football romantic part of me thinks this is tinged with sadness, because those children initially becoming young men, becoming young women, because we've seen the WSL transfer record being broken for $1 million for the first time. They will want to wear the colours. Raphael from Osasuna, he came out with this amazing phrase. My football club is a feeling. And that's what it is. It is that unique relationship that we have, and I think the children that join academies will potentially feel that as well. So to realise that you are being used as a commodity must slightly disappoint things. But if you're good enough to be sold for £18 to £20 million, you are a fantastic talent.
Yeah, the Raphael that Kieran refers to there is Raphael Saenz, who's the finance officer at Osasuna. It's our interview coming up later in the week. We interviewed him about an hour ago, and very, very interesting. we joke about the idea we're not cynical, Kieran, and we do both try not to be cynical or gammon or any of those things that you might associate with people our age, and we, in the most part, we're not. But when you refer to academies as salmon farms, Kieran, it's hard not to say, it's hard not to be cynical about modern football, because I can't think of a more apt metaphor for what is going on there. And the trouble is, a lot of those little baby salmon don't make it to the net, let alone the table. Is the problem, isn't it?
Yes, I mean there is a much broader issue, and I think we've name checked Tony Pulis's report into what's happening with the kids that don't make it, and to be a doctor, you've got to go through some really tough exams, and there's a failure rate. In the world of entertainment, the number of people who first do 5 minutes at the Comedy Store who go on to have a successful career. It's a brutal industry, but there's still a much higher success rate than exists in professional football as far as the children that join the academies. It's a 99.5.8% failure rate. So it's a very sensitive subject, and I'm just concerned that these children, they sacrifice their education, they sacrifice their social peers, and then they are effectively just thrown on the scrap heap. Some clubs are very good at aftercare, but again, you have chats with people who are academy managers, and they say, "Look, I'm under pressure. I'd like to offer more care and more pastoral support to these kids, but if I don't deliver 2 players who get into the first team squad every 5 years, I'll be given a KPI, then my job's on the line, and ultimately I've got to put food on the table as well."
Well, Tony Pulis in his report was even more scathing, because he said some of the kids at top level academies are human cones, essentially. Yeah. That's what they're being used for, with the coaches at the academy knowing full well the kids are not good enough, but they're bringing in the budget. Our next question comes from Stefan Patrici. Apologies, Stefan, if I've mangled your surname. Stefan says, "I've got a question regarding my team Gateshead FC. The Heed have had a fantastic few seasons and are threatening to break into League Two, but despite having a big core fan base, we struggle to draw really large crowds. There's plenty of reasons for this. The existence, of course, of Newcastle United just up the road, and another is the Gateshead International Stadium. While the GIS is an excellent venue and an asset to the community, it's simply not designed with football in mind. A purpose-built football stadium closer to the town centre could attract much larger crowds, as well as acting as an important community hub. My question is, how realistic is it for a National League side to build a brand new stadium without the intervention of a financial sugar daddy? Surely a project like this could attract government funding, particularly with the rumours regarding the development of Old Trafford." Very hard, Kieran, for me, people of our generation, to mention Gateshead International Stadium without thinking about Brendan Foster and Steve Cram.
It is. I was thinking exactly the same.
Yeah. Which is part of the problem for Stefan, isn't it? Because it's very much associated with athletics. But is it feasible for a team the size of Gateshead to build? You're probably looking at an 8,000-9,000 capacity stadium, which the community could then use.
It can be done. It would involve forensic attention to detail in terms of budgeting. We have seen a significant increase in construction costs for real estate. Material costs have gone up, transport costs have gone up, labour costs have gone up. We've got an increase in NI, overhead costs in general have gone up. So trying to build something at a fair price is challenging. As Stefan said, Newcastle are doing fantastic, but there's a limited number of people that can get into St James's Park, and it's sold out every match. Yeah. So there are still spare seats available. To a certain extent, there's always been a case of build it and they will come, but that didn't work with the George Reynolds Arena, not too far away in Darlington, as we know. I think that was 20 to 25,000 capacity, and I think it's now somewhat overgrown. So could this be done? I think it would have to be some form of public-private partnership. Are there some form of regional development grants? You also have to be a little bit careful, because if you are closing down libraries, if you are reducing social services, if you are making cuts in terms of elderly care and education, to be seen to be supporting I think we sometimes forget we're football fans. Everybody I meet, I assume, is a football fan.
Yeah.
And I was in the supermarket over the weekend after the Brighton match. I went to Aldi. I was talking to the bloke, and he says, "Oh, what you been?" I said, "Oh, we've just been, an afternoon wasted." And he says, "Oh, yeah. Did they lose again?" I go, "Yeah. How come you don't know the result?" And then I realised, actually, it's me that's the problem.
Yeah.
I've got this arrogance that everybody's a football fan. He said, "I don't really like football," and I go, "Yeah, I actually envy you in many ways." And people who are not football fans in Gateshead will say, well, if we're going to prioritise on a very limited amount of money that's available, a football club, is that appropriate? So it's a sensitive issue. If there are monies available from the National Lottery Fund, Sport England, and you have a 3G, 4G pitch which can be used for community purposes, then I think you can, with a bit of private money going into it as well, I think you can put forward a much better case.
Well, particularly, Kieran, if you're building a stadium that also contains a doctor's surgery and a nursery and a lunch centre for old age pensioners, then you're solving all those problems for the community. And that shouldn't be beyond the wit and wisdom of people involved in both football and politics. And the regional thing is very interesting, because talking to Raphael from Osasuna, they're very proud because they're right up there on the French border in the region of Navarre, and clearly very proud of their Navarrese identity. But it seems that the regional finance and regional involvement in Spanish football, for example, is much stronger than it is in English football, for example. You rarely hear clubs like Villa and Birmingham and Wolves talking about being funded or helped by the West Midlands Metropolitan Authority, and the same with London and so on. So regional links seem to be much more strong, certainly in Spain, the way Raphael describes it.
Yes. At the same time, I think Andy Burnham's just come out very much in favour of the redevelopment of Old Trafford and the creation of a new stadium. But we've had Andy on the show before. Perhaps we'll try to get him on again to have a chat about the changes there. And I think it is being very much stressed at Manchester United. And I appreciate, it's a different number of zeros to where we are with Gateshead, is that the football club was 100% responsible for the cost of the stadium. Other developments will be getting public funding.
Two more questions, Kieran. The first is from Matthew Hall. Should be quite a simple one to answer. Matthew says, do the PSR rules look at 12-month periods or accounting periods? So there was press coverage last year about the timing of the transfer of Brennan Johnson being after the accounting year end. Could clubs just extend an accounting period to enable compliance?
Yeah, again, I think this is a very valid question. And Matthew, it is based on the annual financial statements. So I give you Leicester City Football Club Limited. And Leicester City Football Club Limited historically had a 31st of May year end. And if you go into the Premier League handbook, wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but it is very comprehensive and it is very, very thorough. If you go to the Premier League handbook, it says that clubs have to have a financial or accounting year end of the 31st of May, 30th of June, or the 31st of July. Perfectly valid, fits into our concept of a football season. On the 24th of April 2023, Leicester City, who were pretty much relegated by that point, they lodged a document at Companies House, which extended their financial year end from the 31st of May 2023 to the 30th of June. This meant that when they transferred their share in the Premier League to, I think it was Sheffield United, on the 13th of June 2023, their financial year end had not ceased. And this allowed them to successfully defend their position against charges. And our very good friend Nick DeMarco, of course, acted on their behalf. So therefore, they were not subject to financial sanctions and in terms of being able to transfer players in the EFL, because it was deemed that they were not part of the EFL. They were not part of the Premier League as well, because they had very, very cleverly and applied and tweaked a position that allowed them to not be a member of either, simply by extending their financial year end. So it is a strange one. Based on my calculations, they would have started the season with a 7-point penalty had that not been the case. But they applied the rules. They have done absolutely nothing wrong according to the Premier League handbook. Again, this is a classic example of unintended consequences of having an independent Premier League and EFL, where the two sets of rules are not compliant with one another.
Sorry, interesting that you say their share was transferred to Sheffield United, because it didn't occur to me that the shares were specifically transferred. So it is the club that finishes 18th, does their share go to the club that wins the championship? And the club 19th, their share goes to the club that runners up in the championship? Or they just give 3 clubs give 3 shares back and 3 clubs get...
I will try and investigate this. I mean, it could be done on that basis. It could be done alphabetically.
Right, okay.
Nobody really cares.
Well, no,
I'm Luton Town, I'm Sheffield United, I'm Burnley, whoever it's going to be. I've got a share in the Premier League and all of the benefits of being a shareholder.
Yeah, it makes no financial difference. I just wonder if that's the case. Edward Hurtle has our last question. And this is an interesting one. And Edward says, since it seems that the higher you climb in the EFL pyramid, the more money you lose, which is so counterintuitive, Kieran, when you think about it, but he's absolutely right. Has there ever been an instant, or is there an option, where a team has qualified for promotion and purposely turned it down? I mean, certainly plenty of conspiracy theories back in the day, Kieran, when you'd see a team pushing for promotion, suddenly having a run of bad results, and everyone would go, yeah, they can't afford to go up. That's what they're doing. They're deliberately staying down, which always seemed a strange concept. But it's one of those things that once a football fan gets that in his head, it's difficult to shake it out.
There's nothing that I can see that would prove that, Edward. But you are right. And I think I seem to recall a book called Unfit and Improper Persons.
Yeah, great.
I can't remember who the authors were.
Really good.
Which looked at a club which was starting effectively in park football and was then going through the different tiers of football that exist here in England, eventually arising at the Premier League and European level. And what was very clear from the extensive research undertaken by the authors was that there were very significant step-up costs, which were glossed over by said authors, because they managed to borrow money from a friend of one of the author's uncles, I think.
Fictionally, yeah.
Fictional friend. Yeah. Acquaintance.
Yeah.
So there are some. It does become very, and we've just been talking about Gateshead, and I think it was it Gateshead who were not allowed to join the EFL because they're going back to what Stefan's just been saying. Their premises didn't satisfy the criteria as laid down, and I think that something horrendous. I have to apologise for this, but I think they weren't even allowed to be in the playoffs, because even if they'd won the playoffs, they wouldn't have been able to comply with EFL rules. So I'm not aware of any clubs doing it deliberately, but you're absolutely right, Edward. The average losses in League Two, probably around about £400,000 to £500,000 a week, for a year. that rises, and it's risen very extensively in League One in the last 2 or 3 years. So it's now 2 or 3 or 4 million a year. You jump up to the Championship, it's 20 million a year. And then you go to the Premier League, where we had Chelsea that lost £249 million in 2023, and fortunately managed to find somebody to buy a car park or two at the club to help make things a little bit better.
I'm fascinated by Edward's notion that there might be an option for a promoted club not to take up the promotion. I mean, that's something we need to check with Trevor Birch, who's head of the EFL, because as we know, there have been occasions when promoted clubs are told they can't play at home for 6 or 7 games because maybe they have to take a plastic pitch up or whatever. But I'd really be interested to learn whether a club could say, look, I'm simply, a club the size of Luton Town getting into the Premier League saying, we can't afford to make the necessary upgrade to be in the Premier League. Can we skip it this season and try again? I'd love to know if that's an option. So thank you for putting that in our head, Edward. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you get an ad-free listening, bonus episodes and more. I forgot the comma there, Kieran, so I should have said you'll get ad-free listening, bonus episodes and more. And the more includes, we're recording this on Monday, 7:30 tonight. If you are a Price of Football Club member, you can have a chat with us in person. You can see our faces and everything. You'll be able to see my picture of Benteke and Jean-Philippe Mateta celebrating their goals against Brighton in 2020. It's almost... Trouble is, this will have gone out by the time we've done that, so there's no point in me saying it's almost worth joining now. But we'll be doing one of those a month. And if you want to join the Price of Football Club, just go to priceoffootball.com and click on Join the Club to sign up. There's something of a 70s chocolate advert about that expression, isn't there, somehow?
We don't see Club Biscuits anymore,
We don't see Club Biscuits anymore. And if you did, I imagine they'd be smaller, Kieran.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I imagine there'll be a stand-up comic going, it's in my imagination, it's Club Biscuits smaller these days. So click on Join the Club to sign up today. And please be aware, though, that if you are one of our wonderful Patreon subscribers, your membership will not transfer over automatically if you sign up to the new club. When. You will need to cancel your Patreon subscription and set up a new one using the link on the website. We'll be turning off our Patreon offering at the end of February. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And this, I know I sound like I'm plugging this, but if you're in the Price of Football Club, we've got separate questions pods for you. You can ask topical questions. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter X, and you can find us on YouTube. And for those many people, I should say, who have spoken to us on Twitter X about moving platform, we are discussing that. I don't think it's something that we could do in a matter of weeks, but we understand a lot of you leaving X and Twitter, so we are looking at other options. But for the meantime, we will be staying there. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Thursday with our regular news pod. There's a lot of news already. Or if you're a Price of Football Club member, we'll be back tomorrow because you get early access to that interview with Rafael Osasuna. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell. I have asked Kieran to put his ABBA wig back on for this, and his 70s shirt that he was so proudly wearing the other night, but he's point blank refused, unfortunately. You might do it for our public meeting with our club members. Don't worry, you never know.
I think the wig has been put in the refuse bin by a well-known baroness.
Don't tell me even Fiddley turned his nose up at it.
It was. I had this sort of 1970s style moustache went with it as well, and that. Well, I thought it was fine. I was trying to enter into the swing of things.
You look great. You look like an extra from Life on Mars. You were living the dream. You were fantastic.
Thank you to first of all, let's say everybody that's been Patreon members. Thank you. You've been absolutely brilliant. What we're aiming with Price of Football Club is to give you something better. And that's why we're looking forward to having a chat with people tonight. We set up a dedicated email address, so you'll have your own club members' dedicated questions episode and so on. So that's the rationale behind it all. You can say, however, that you you've got better things to do with your money, and we absolutely understand that, or we don't think we're worth anything, and again, absolutely understand that. I have no issue whatsoever with our inability to stay on topic as well. But one way of helping us is to give us a review. It does help us with algorithms. It helps us when people are considering coming on the show, and we've got a long list of people. We're looking forward to some surprise guests, people you thought, well, no way they would appear on the show. But no, we're looking forward to some of our guests in the next few weeks. We do pride ourselves on giving people a right of reply as well. That is what's right and proper. But it doesn't matter what you say in the review. You could even say you would rather have, if you're fond of 17th century history, Slade the Leveller and Noddy Holder from the other Slade. And I think that'd be absolutely fantastic.
That would be very good. It's still a friend of mine used to live in Walsall. It's a very underrated place, Walsall. I love it. But I still, if you go to the new Walsall, it's not that new anymore, but the Walsall Art Gallery, and the voice of the lift is Noddy Holder.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Going up, this is his actual voice, which is it's just very funny. It's a little added value like that I love in a museum. So I've met Noddy a couple. He's great, Noddy Holder.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Oh no, he's a man who realises that his life could have gone in a different direction. He could be a retired welder by now, but he's made the most of the opportunities that were given to him. God love him. God loves Slade. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.